Welcome to the house. My name is Wes. My wife Vanessa and I were the lead pastors here, and we just want to say welcome home. Right now, we are in a series called When God Rewrites Your Story. The goal of this series is not to get you to think like me on every topic or to get you to copy someone else. Although, having a leader in your life or someone that you look up to, that can actually be a very positive thing. The goal of this series is that you would become the best and the greatest version of yourself. The version that God had in mind when He created you in your mother's womb. Not someone else's version, not a bad version, not a sub-version or a perverted version, but the idea, the plan that God had for you from the very beginning. Recently, I went on a run with a friend in San Diego. We ran this trail, and these trails have existed long before you and I were ever in existence. My job in running the trails with my friend that day was not to create new trails, but to find the trails that have already been developed. Anywhere that I happen to go off trail or try to maybe even create my own trail, there was danger or dead ends. And maybe you've tried to forge your own way in this life, and you've tried to, hey, I'm gonna change, I'm gonna do something a little bit different, and you've experienced those dangers and those dead ends as well. It's time for you and I to find the right way, God's plan for your life, the ancient way, the way pre-planned that God has for your life. Like what God tells the prophet Jeremiah when he says, before you were even born, while you were still in your mother's womb, I knew you. I had a plan for you. I want you to know as we go into this series of talks together that God has a great plan for your life. Hey, welcome to the house. My name is Wes. My wife Vanessa and I, we're the pastors here. You just saw an introduction to this entire series that we're doing called When God Rewrites Your Story. Last week we talked about step number 1, which is identifying the problem of, am I living the wrong story? Have I been wound up and headed in the wrong direction? And today we're going to talk about who is narrating. Who is narrating the story of your life? First question I want to ask you today is this: whose voice will you listen to most? Whose voice will you listen to most? Now, if I could have anyone narrate the story of my life, if I could have anyone, it is a lock, it is a no-brainer. There's no one even probably close in second place but Morgan Freeman. Morgan, if somehow, Mr. Freeman, if somehow you're watching this, I just want to know you have one of the most iconic voices. I mean, when he's talking at Shawshank Redemption and he's doing the narration of that movie, it is a masterpiece. Just a wonderful, rich voice. And to have him narrate, so if I could have Morgan Freeman narrate the voiceover for my life, and if I could have Hans Zimmer, an incredible composer, if I can have him behind composing, I mean, life would be perfect, right? If you could have that, right? So here's the question I have for you today. Whose voice will you listen to most? Another way to ask, who will narrate the story of your life? Now, I did, just so you know, I did look on one of those websites where you can find an actor or an actress or someone like that to, send a video. And actually, I looked to see if Morgan Freeman was on there because I thought it'd be so cool to have him do some narration for this, but he was not available on there. There's a difference between what you hear and what you actually listen to. So what you hear and what you listen to. Not just what you hear, because all the time, even right now as we're recording this, there's a building just not too far from here and I can hear music coming from, but it's not going into my heart. I'm not listening. I'm not ruminating. I'm not meditating on those things. It's just out there. But there's other things that you and I that we hear and we think through. We play back. We play those conversations over and over and over. The question I have for you today is not only who will narrate your story, but what's that voice that is going to win? Remember, we're talking about when God rewrites your story, of all of the voices that you hear, whose voice will you listen to? 1 Samuel 17 says this. It tells the story of David fighting against Goliath. David fighting against Goliath. And I'm going to kind of jump around with a couple verses. And so if you don't know the passage, that's fine. You can actually go and find this passage in 1 Samuel 17. You can Google it. If you have a Bible, you can look in that. But I'm going to jump around some verses here. It says this: the Philistines now mustered their army for battle and camped between Sukkah and Judah and Ezekiah in Ephes-dammim. Saul countered by gathering his Israelite troops near the valley of Elah. So the Philistines and Israelites faced each other on opposite hills. So there's this valley between them, and they're facing off between opposite hills. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He's almost 10 feet tall. He's like about 9 foot 9 inches. So this guy is an NBA legend, 1,000 points a game. No one can stop him. Verse 8, Goliath stood and he shouted a taunt from his side to the Israelite side. Why are you all coming out to fight? He called. I'm the Philistine champion, but you are only servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. Because they're saying, hey, why don't you guys choose one, and then we'll choose one, and we'll kind of go head to head. David asked the soldier standing nearby, because David's coming, he's bringing his brother some lunch. His dad said, hey, he's just a young shepherd boy, and his dad says, hey, can you come bring your brother's lunch? And while he's bringing them lunch, he hears this giant shouting all these things, and so David goes, wait, hold on. What will someone get for killing this Philistine and ending this defiance of Israel? Like, who is this guy anyways that he's allowed to defy the armies of the living God? Like, he's saying terrible stuff about us, terrible stuff about God. Why is this being allowed to happen? David's older brother, Eliab, his older brother, his own kin, heard David saying this, and he's like, what are you doing around here anyways? What are you doing here anyways? What about those few sheep? Come on, go off to your little area, your little chores, your little things. Go just shoo. Like as something only an older sibling can do. Just go shoo, go do your little chores. And he goes, look, I know about your pride. I know about your conceit. You're just here to see a battle. I mean, he's just berating and belittling his younger brother. Verse 41, David has now, between that point and this point, David's talked to the king and he goes, hey, let me go fight this guy. The king's like, hold on a second. You surely can't do this, but no one wanted to fight Goliath. So he's like, okay, fine, here, just go. And then verse 41, Goliath walked out towards David with a shield bearer ahead of him. So Goliath is walking out, he's got a shield bearer ahead of him, and he sneers in contempt at this young boy. He goes, am I a dog? Like, am I a little chihuahua that you're coming out after me with a little stick? And he cursed David. He's like just swearing and cussing at David. And he says, hey, come over here. I'm going to give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. He's like, I'm going to crush you. I'm going to annihilate you. All these different narrations now in David's life. And we're going to talk about this. David replied to the Philistine. He goes, hey, look, you come to me with a sword, a spear, a javelin. I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Today, the Lord will conquer you. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to cut off your head. And then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. Everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, not with sword, with spear. This is the Lord's battle. And he will give you to us. So here's some quick background on this. They're fighting. They're on the two different sides. They're yelling at each other. And the Philistine says, hey, let's just go 1v1. Let's go 1v1 instead of all of us battling. Let's go 1v1. And he's nearly 10 foot tall, and no one wants to battle against this guy. David determines in his heart, he goes, hey, look, this guy cannot be saying this about God and about God's people. Verse 24 actually tells us that the Israelites, when they saw Goliath, every time they saw him, they would run away. 3 major voices happen when David decides to face the giant. And by the way, last week we talked about identifying the problem. And if you begin to identify the problem and say, you know what, I want to make some changes. I want God to rewrite my story. You need to be prepared that there will be some voices that will fight against you, that will try to narrate your story back to where you were. Number one, his family misunderstands him. You have to be prepared for the people closest to you to misunderstand you. Where Eliab goes, David, just go shoot. Go back to your little, oh, you're going to church now. Oh, you're one of those churchy church people. Oh, but on Tuesday, I saw you slipping back in your life. And they will try to narrate your story back to the way that you used to live. Second thing, his king underestimates him. Like King Saul, we didn't read this verse, but in verse 33, King Saul goes, wait, David, how are you going to take on this giant? You don't have the skills. You don't have the background. You're just a little shepherd boy. This guy is a champion. You have to be prepared that when you start living the story that God has given you to live, when you start going to say, God, I want you to rewrite the story of my life, that there might be some people around you who underestimate you. The next one is the enemy mocks him. Are you prepared to be mocked? You know, when you're kind of going the easy route, no one gives anyone a hard time for doing that. No one gives anyone a hard time for going the easy route. But the moment that you decide, I'm going to live God's story for my life, I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to go to bed early, I'm going to read my Bible, I'm going to go to church, I'm going to do what God's called me to do, I'm going to build this business, I'm going to give generously, I'm going to live the story that God has for me. You know what's going to happen? The enemy's going to be like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You don't come from a Jesus family. You don't have a Jesus people background. You don't have that. You can't go to that level. Who do you think you are? And that's exactly what Goliath says to David. He sneers at him. Who do you think I am that you would come after me with a stick? Am I just like a little dog? Another way to say it, you'll never make it. Your business will never make it. Your sobriety will never make it. Your purity will never make it. These prayers will never make it. You need to be prepared that there will be a negative narration that you will need to fight against of the enemy of your soul trying to get you to go back to the old way. The moment that you decide to change your story, there will be a major fight for narration. Now, everyone has those different voices. Everyone has different people that want to speak into their life. The battle is not who has it worse. Because there are some of you, I realize some of you watching this and some of you who might even be a part of our community, that you might have it tougher than others. And I realize that not everyone is dealt the same deck of cards, and it's just not fair. That some people are dealt like with parents who love them, and some people are dealt cards of parents who speak negatively and belittling against them. The battle is not who has it worse. The battle is who will we listen to as narrator of our lives. Whose voice will you listen to? Will you listen to their voice? The outside voice, it will always either puff you up or tear you down. They'll gas you up. Oh man, you got this, you got this, you got this. Or they'll tear you down. Will you listen to the enemy's voice? Condemnation. The enemy of your soul will tell you that you're worthless, that you can never do it, that you can never live for God, that you can never live sober, that you can never live the holy life. How about this? Your own negative self-talk. This one is probably one of the worst narrators that you could listen to. The thoughts that go through your mind of, I can't, I'm not able, I'm weak, I'm unfixable, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, I can never be normal. Have you ever had a tough time moving on from a negative event in your life? Maybe something negative happened and you go to like a work event. You go to a work event, and this is maybe not a major negative event, but you go to a work event and you just bomb. You don't do well. And you leave that and you go, that was not my best work. Or maybe you're at some social event and you overshare a story. I do this sometimes. I overshare a story and then I leave and I'm like cringing for myself. I'm like, Wes, why did you share so much? Or why did you share that story about yourself like they weren't interested or whatever? And you leave and you go, that was not my best work. Well, many of us call that process right there, we call that processing. Like, hey, I'm just kind of thinking through that. Chris Hodges in his book, Out of the Cave, where he talks about overcoming depression, he calls that, he says, it's like ruminating. It's like a cow chewing cud. And the cow chews, swallows it, and then its stomach says, no, it ain't ready yet, and it spits it back up, and the cow starts chewing again. This negative self-talk allows our feelings, this is what he said, it allows our feelings to define our lives and dictate our actions. He says this, Chris Hodges says this, don't chew your thoughts, choose your thoughts. How quickly those negative voices out there, the enemy's voice or maybe your own negative self-talk, how quickly those voices out here can become adopted, and then we start ruminating and chewing on those thoughts in our own mind. Another way to say it, Pastor Philip in his book, Unlock Your Dream, he says it like this. He says, essentially, we allow those things that we hear and fear to grow in our minds and become the words that we speak, words that we believe. The question you have to ask yourself this, on all of those outside voices, how does any of this line up with what God says about you? Got all these external voices, all these voices out here, all these opinions out here. How does any of this line up with what God says about you? All these other narrations, and God also has a narration for your life. How does any of this line up with that? The fourth and final voice is heaven's voice. As a shepherd, David spent time alone with God. And because that continual time alone with God, he learned how to hear God's voice. Like we get many of the Psalms that were just songs. They were like the Billboard Top 100 of his day. David's name is like boom, 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 boom. It's all the way down there. Like all of them were all his. Like you thought Thriller was awesome. Like David's like, I got Psalm 23. Everyone's singing Psalm 23. Instead of doing the Thriller, they're like, yeah, the Lord's my shepherd. I don't know, whatever that dance move would be, right? So David's spending time with them. And then David says this, the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion, the claws of the bear, will rescue me from this Philistine as well. David echoed what God said about him. You have to make a decision on this journey of when God rewrites your story, of not just identifying the problem, but just choosing, I choose to allow God to narrate the story of my life. Everyone, you, me, the person next to you, everyone needs to hear what heaven says about them. Someone said amen. Everyone needs to hear what we see in Matthew 3:17. This is my dearly loved son who brings me great joy. My question for you today is, who is narrating your story? Timothy Keller says it like this, if you're filled with shame and guilt, you do not merely need to believe in the abstract concept of God's mercy, like God's mercy way somewhere out there. You must sense on the palate of the heart the sweetness of his mercy. Then you will know that you are accepted. You need an encounter with heaven. You need an encounter with the voice of God telling you, you are my beloved son, you are my beloved daughter. And then choosing, this is the narration of my life. What God says about me will narrate my life. Whoever you listen to becomes your narrator. Whoever narrates your life determines the direction of your life. Whose voice will you listen to? Choosing the voice is choosing the direction that you will head. Only those who have really, honestly, who have had a true encounter with God's voice in their life can look a 10-foot giant in the face and confidently say, everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. Next week, we're going to continue on this journey of when God rewrites your story. And we're going to talk about how can I remember what God has said. Today we're talking about the narration. And next week we're going to talk about how can I remember what God has said. Let me pray for you as we close. Jesus, thank you for my friends watching this right now. And I'm praying, God, that you're going to help them to choose the right narration of their story, that they would hear God's words over their life. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, for more questions about how you can get involved, how you can give, how you can respond, how you can join with us, you can check out thehousela.org. I also just finally want to say thank you to those of you who have liked, you've subscribed, you've shared these messages on YouTube and on Facebook with others. Thank you so much. That helps us get the message out. So thank you so much for doing that. If you're able to do that in this message, that would be helpful as well. Lastly, thank you for those of you who have partnered with us in your generosity. It makes a world of difference, and we are only able to do what we do because of God's blessing and because of your help. So if you'd like to join us, there's no gift too big or too small. You can go to thehousela.org/give, and you can give securely one time, or you can set it up to reoccurring. God bless, and we'll see you back next week here at the house.